Welcome to the illustrated alphabet E for Encaustic. Well, faux encaustic, really. This is Paula from Scrap Effects and Moxie Mojo. So what is encaustic? It's a Greek word meaning to heat or burn in. Heat is used throughout the process, from melting beeswax and varnish to fusing the layers of wax together. It's also known as hot wax painting. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have the right or proper encaustic products, so I used what I had in my craft stash. So you're going to see a bit of everything here. I started off with a clear gessoed page. Now in the first part of the series I went through how I prepared the album, and this one happened to be a clear gesso page. I'd done a mix of clear, white and black gesso on the different pages. I started in this first layer using coloured patches, 3 per colour, of Faber-Castell twist crayons. I heated up the crayons once I'd completely covered the page that it was, and smoothed the crayons a little with a palette knife, and then I went back and coloured each patch again with the same colour. The second layer was much more intense and opaque coverage compared to the first one. I then heated the crayons again and repeated the smoothing with a palette knife to help blend the colours in and give me a smooth surface. Now, you'll see me jumping about a bit, and yes, it has been sped up because, to be honest, the whole lot took me about 2.5 hours of what I've filmed. And to be honest, I didn't think anyone wanted to sit there and watch me heat wax or colour in. So I've just given little highlights and sped through some of the slow bits. But I wanted you to see all the different steps that I did. So I've separated a napkin here, pulled off the 2 bottom layers, the clear one, well, white ones I should say, and separated the top to get a thin layer. I've scrunched it up, and what I'm doing now is melting the crayons again, and I tried putting the napkin on, but it wasn't really sticking. So what I'm doing now is I've got some little wee beeswax pellets, and these I'm melting in a foil tin just to keep them all together with my heat gun. Now, I just wanted to show you very quickly how long this took. And that's why you can see all of the heating in there. It really wasn't that much, to be honest, but it did take a wee while, and you find that even though they're melted, because of the ambient temperature, they actually cool down quite quickly, and that's why they go that sort of white, opaque look again. So, back to the story, I melted the beeswax pellets until they were liquid and then brushed this all over the crayon. Now I used one dedicated brush for this so that I wouldn't end up with all my paint brushes with wax stuck through them. Once the entire page had been covered with the beeswax, I then went over this again and heated small patches of the beeswax and pressed the napkin into the melted wax. I used the paintbrush that I'd used earlier to help push the napkin into the wax, heating it patch by patch until the entire page was covered. Once the wax had cooled, I tore off the excess napkin around the page. Just did this by finger tearing to give me a rough edge, but it still looked nice without too much excess. I then used some Crayola coloured crayons, in which I've previously removed all the paper wrappers from. I picked out the colours that coordinated with the background that I'd already done. And you can see there picking out some greens and blues, and yes, I've got two packs there, and I've actually sorted them so that all the cool colours are in one pack and all the warm colours are in the other pack. Just makes going through the crayons a little bit easier for me. And now what I'm doing is actually melting the crayons and allowing the melted crayon to drip onto the background. Now, if you are trying this at home, you do need to be very careful because the heat gun does have a tendency to splatter the crayons around. I do recommend that you use a craft mat underneath what you're working on, and you may wish to actually put some protection like some newspaper or something like that around your desk so that any splatters can be caught by that rather than going onto your precious craft tools or display items around you. I use similar colours here as mentioned and just drip them randomly over the page as I had done in the first layer. I lifted the page to encourage the wax to drop and drip, flowing over the page to add to the texture. I also heated the page once the wax was down and allowed the heated crayon on the page to flow further and that was through heating it directly. Once the crayon wax had cooled, I sprinkled over some perfect pearls onto areas of wax that I had heated, then reheated it to set the perfect pearls into the crayon wax. Now this was actually easier said than done because I was finding the wax, both from the beeswax and the crayon wax, would dry so quickly it was hard to get an even sprinkling, and I also didn't have the ideal tool for sprinkling the perfect pearls. In hindsight, I think a spoon might have been better, but even so, I still really like the finished result once I'd put down some perfect pearls all over it. I took some pieces of recycled cardboard that I have, and this is corrugated cardboard. I've cutting out 3 hearts by hand. They start off as different sizes, but it's not until I actually try putting them on the page that I go through and work out what the final sizes of the hearts will be. And because they're just being cut by hand, I didn't have a pattern as such, just cutting as I thought fit to see the shape. And you'll see here that I measure them against each other and see what size it is that I want until I get the match of sizes or the mix of sizes that suit the page and suit the design that I'm going for. The first couple are almost the same size, when I put them on the page they actually seem a little bit too big. So this one I'm actually going to cut down quite a bit so that it isn't as big and sort of use up as much of the page, because I do want to see that really cool background that I'd spent so much time on up till now. I really love the way that this looked, and the perfect pearls gave it a subtle sort of metallic look and different patches, and I didn't want to hide too much of that. And the great thing about doing this is that because I'm not using a pattern, I'm just eyeballing it, so I can make them whatever size I want. So, throwing away the scraps, and now we've got our hearts all ready to be decorated. Now I'm distressing the top side of the hearts by randomly pulling off one of the flat sides. I'm using a pokey tool here to help me to lift off that top layer, and then I'm pulling it off just in random places so that I can see a mix of the corrugated sort of lines of corrugated cardboard, as well as some patches still of the flat top layer that I hadn't pulled off. Now I was concerned about the hearts actually flying around because they were relatively small. And as I heated them with the heat gun, I didn't want them sliding everywhere and running the risk that I was actually going to burn myself. So I've just used some masking tape to adhere them in place on my craft mat. And what I'm doing now is colouring the hearts in the same manner that I did with the background, only this time I'm using a selection of warm colours, reds and pinks, to colour the hearts. It's the same manner, dripping the crayon wax onto the hearts and then just giving a blend once the hearts have been covered. Just using a selection of colours here and blending, dripping that wax all over the hearts. Just trying to get the coverage at this stage and get a good mix. Now you see there the splatter going onto the craft mat. That's what I was talking about, how you have to be very careful with the heat tool. Now I've melted some more of the beeswax and I'm using that to help spread the coloured of the coloured wax from the crayons all over the entire surface of those hearts, as I want to make sure the entire heart, or all three of them, is well coated in wax and colouring. I then set them aside to dry. I repeated the previous step of adding perfect pearls onto the hearts, but this time I used a selection of warm colours, more pinks, reds, and a little bit of a purpley pink. I'm trimming down some jewellery wire and I'm using my round nosed pliers to curl these into twisted stems. I'm starting them off with the pliers and then moving the twisted wire to a skewer, or bamboo skewer, the entire skewer. Once it's all been tied into a spiral, I'm then pulling it apart to loosen that spiral and turn it into a twisted stem. I also do some little wee korus or spirals from some of the different coloured wires, and that's to add some more dimension and bling to the page. Adhering these was difficult, and I first of all tried adhering the wires and the hearts in place with some melted wax, but that really to be doing the trick. So what I did was actually use some Aleene's tacky glue. I found that was able to handle the dimension of the background a lot better than what the beeswax was, and so that actually held both the wire pieces and the hearts in place a lot better than using the beeswax. And here I am just putting everything into place, working out where I want it to go before I adhere it down. Putting little wee decorative bits around, working out, have I made enough? Do I want to add some more? And then adhering it all in place. And this is a bit where I know we all spend a little bit of time, is working out where we want to put things down. And I, like a lot of craft people, like to do sort of a visual take first rather than just sticking everything down, and that enables me to work out a lot better where I want to place things. Now I'm just spreading the glue well on the back of the heart so that I know it's going to stick in place, because I do know how textured this has turned out with the tissue and then all the different wax layers as well. To add a title onto this page, I've torn a white piece of watercolour paper to size. I'm just tearing it by hand, giving myself an approximate size that I want. I will go back and tear it even smaller once I've stamped in place the word Encaustic. Now you saw a little bit of card there. I was initially thinking about putting that underneath the title, but in the end I did change my mind because I felt it didn't look right. Now I'm using Versamark ink to stamp the word Encaustic, and then I will sprinkle across some Lindy's embossing powder and then heat emboss that so that the word stands out on the white watercolor paper. Now I know it's not exactly encaustic using embossing powder, but I felt that the technique sort of lent its way towards going with the heated wax techniques I'd used previously. So I thought it was complementary in this particular case. So just putting the excess back in the bottle there before I heat set and heat emboss the embossing powder for the title. I just used some of my Hero Arts alphabet stamps, little wee blocks, single letters on like a peg stamp to give me the word that I wanted. So I'm happy with how that has stamped out, and apologies for this coming out upside down. So now I'm just tearing it down to size a little bit more now that I've got the word embossed on there, holding it up on the page, and I think no, it does need to go down a little bit smaller. That's just looking a tad bit too much white paper for the page and for what I want. I want the title to stand out but not overpower the rest of what's on the page. So just tearing it down a little bit, and again here's the hard decision, is where do you want to put everything. So I've worked out what I want to do, or where I want to put it, but just before I adhere it in place, I'm just going to colour around the edge of the title with I think it's metallic purple or metallic grape gelato. Now I've just drawn around the edge of that with the gelato itself, putting a little wee spray of water onto my craft mat, and now I'm just using my finger to blend out that gelato all around the word there, focusing most of the colour on the outer edge but blending it gently in towards the word because it was looking too white and too stark for the page, because as you can see it does look quite dark and the hearts come across as being quite dark, so I didn't want the white to overpower too much. Final step when I've coloured that, and yes, tweezers are handy for something when it's that small so that you don't burn your fingers, but final step is to actually adhere the title in place and finish the page. So I know it's been a while since I posted or started this alphabet series, illustrated alphabet series, but I am determined to finish it, and I will carry on with the rest of the letters in the alphabet because I've actually found it really interesting to go through and find art words related to each of the letters of the alphabet, particularly terms and techniques that I didn't know what they were and so wanted to give a go. For instance, encaustic work. I'd never done that before, but I've admired the work that some other creators have done, so that's what I wanted to give it a go. So here you can see some of those perfect pearls as well as the other work. So thank you for joining me. Be sure to subscribe and click that bell for notifications.